So you had a really surreal moment last spring when the leaders of the Western world, Merkel and Cameron and Obama, were once again united in criticism of China. And why this time were they criticizing China? It was over trade issues once again, because China had the audacity to subsidize their solar panel industry. And rather than thinking, well, maybe we should also subsidize our solar panel industry given that the world is fucked and we need to save it and solar panels would be a very good move in the right direction, instead they took China to the World Trade Organization court and whatever and made China stop giving such subsidies to their solar panel industry. And they were talking about trade war. And talk of trade war makes Chinese people nervous. And the reason why is because the original trade war was a war fought with naval ships and cannons and guns, and where 20,000 people were killed. If I could remember the chords, that'd be good, right? Let me tell you a tale. Stir a hornet's nest, well remembered in the East, most forgotten in the West. It was the 1830s, and the Industrial Revolution was turning Europe into a land of wage slaves and air pollution. The history books tell us it was the era of free trade, and the entire world hungered for the products Europe made. Merchants plied their wares across the 7 seas, and they brought back things like porcelain, silk, and tea. Soon all the tea in China could barely keep the West awake. To thirst for Chinese products as could barely be slaked. They liked to drink their tea in cups of Chinese porcelain, and those who could afford it loved the silk upon their skin. But what made the merchants and the monarchs scream and cry and shout? They seemed to have little to offer that China couldn't live without. They didn't want their muskets, and they didn't want their wool, which left the British coffers empty and the Chinese coffers full. They called it a trade war. They called it a trade war, and I guess that could be so. They say it's not free trade if it's just a one-way flow, because apparently free trade is when the West comes out ahead. That's how it is in practice, though that's never what is said. The fact of history, they'd have a sweep under the rug. The one thing they could sell in China was an addictive drug. It had long been banned by Chinese law, but the British didn't care. They packed the opium up in crates and they shipped it there. They called it a trade war. It all came to a head in 1838, when the soldiers of the emperor torched 20,000 crates. It took 3 days to burn it, and when the fires had gone out, the Chinese people would soon learn what free trade was all about. Navies came from Britain, France, and the USA. In blood, land, and silver, they would make the Chinese pay. Cities leveled, thousands killed. The war was 3 years long. That's how they opened China. That's how they got Hong Kong. And they called it a trade war. And they called it a trade war.